Hey, Nevo. Thank you. Thanks for joining us on the Engineering Manifestos podcast. Appreciate you taking the time to join and share your experiences in terms of building and running teams with us and with the listeners.
Hey Raj, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So yeah, let's get started off. Initially we asked the guests to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about themselves, give their background so that it's helpful for the listeners in terms of what has worked for you as a leader in those company contexts that you've operated in. So yeah, please go
Sure,
ahead.
sure. Great. So I'm an entrepreneur, at least in the last decade or so. I started a company called Visual Lead. It was a computer vision company. We built a solution for like brands to better communicate with the clients through the packages of the goods. So if you're a consumer, you can scan the package and interact with the brand. And we kind of built the company in Israel and China. I had my engineering team here in Israel, which grew from 5 people, 10 people, 30, 40, 50 people. And this is, I think, the first time I met the challenge of how you can manage a fast-growing engineering team remotely, while trying to mitigate and set the right expectations of the communication and delivery between engineering and the business side, which was in China, right? So it's, I think, one of the main challenges I faced there. Anyway, eventually we sold this company to Alibaba, and the engineering team became the research and development center of Alibaba Group here in Tel Aviv. Since then, by the way, the team grew to 100 and more engineers. After I left there, I decided, okay, I want to do something to solve what I just, faced in the last 5-6 years. And I joined forces with two co-founders. Both of them were like developers from the age of 8, and they met each other at the main intelligence unit of the Israeli army. And they were developers both in the army, later in the local industry, team leaders, group managers, engineering managers. So they had it all, and we all shared the same common ground of facing the challenges of growing engineering teams. And at that point, we decided, okay, we want to do something about it, and we started Acumen. Acumen is the company, is the startup we have today. 2 years old, about 20 engineers, and practically what we do is we help growing engineering teams face the challenges of scale. Eventually, when you grow from 20 to 50 to 100, 200 developers, you face many challenges. For example, some of the challenges I mentioned before, like how you can manage remote teams and still make it efficient, how you can have visibility into what's going on, where are the bottlenecks, where do I have inefficiencies in the process, and why the heck my velocity doesn't go up when I add so many people, right? So these are the things we tackle. We do it using AI and technology, collecting information out of the existing workflow and systems the development team works with.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Nevo, for the introduction. Appreciate it. So I guess in terms of the framework of this discussion, the next thing we jump into is sort of the objectives for the engineering team, right? So, and this is more in the context of maybe your experience at Acumen or your previous startup as well. So how do you go about figuring out what it is your company or business, your marketplace, or your competitive environment needs purely from an engineering standpoint, right? So how do you come up with principles and practices for defining objectives for your engineering teams? So if you can give us a little bit of context on that, that'd be helpful.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, there are several layers of goals and KPIs. I don't think an engineering team can jump over everything at once. It has to be built from ground up. I think the most important thing is the alignment, okay? Like we have to know, and the team has to know that they work on the right thing and why. And I think it's a mistake I see many entrepreneurs do, and many executives do. If you don't explain the engineering team the reason behind what they do, there's a very good chance your efficiency will be far away from optimal. Mm-hmm. Your team motivation will not be as it can be, as it should be, and everything else, So I think, the first and main very important principle is the alignment. We should all understand where are we aiming at more than 1 month ahead. Like what's the vision, why we are doing what we are doing, why we set these priorities the way we set, okay? If the single developer understands the priority and why she is required to do this and that, her work becomes much more efficient eventually, okay? So that's, I think, one thing. To be more practical, so things I do and I recommend, other colleagues to do. So first of all, communicate it internally. I can tell you in Acumen and also in previous companies I worked for, every week we have a company update where the CEO talks in front of everyone, explain what we did on the business, what was good, what went bad, what can we improve, what is the focus every month, what's the focus on the longer term. So that's one thing, communicate and communicate and never stop. Another word would be transparency, which is the same. Second practical thing is we do a product roundtable. Why? Because in many companies, I see frustration from developers that say, if I could decide, I would build this feature and that feature this way, or even a different feature than what we do now. And you keep hearing this, which is great. They say it because they care about what the company do, and they think if we do this or that, we can do better. So what we do, we call it product roundtable. So the team, the squad, the department, doesn't matter, depends on the amount of people. You cannot do it with 200 people, so you have to divide it to groups. We go over the roadmap, what's in progress 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, and a year ahead. And we see the epics, like what are the projects that we plan ahead and what are the priorities. And then each and every developer can say his or her opinion. I think this, I think that. We have a debate. Sometimes we change priorities because this debate led to the understanding that this or that person is right, or 20 out of 30 people think this is what we should do, then maybe they are right? So, but the more important thing is that it gives the team the stage and the ability to make an impact and directly impact the motivation and eventually the efficiency of the team. So these are, I think, two practical tools to create this alignment and setting expectations between engineering and business. That's, I think, the base of everything we do. Okay?
Sure.
Next stage is to look at the metrics, to look into, okay, so now we have an engineering team. This engineering team understands the goal, the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Where are we heading for? Now we can set a bunch of metrics or KPIs or OKRs to make sure we put emphasis where we want. Okay, and here again, it changes between industries. It changes between different stages of the company. So, for example, financial fintech company at its early stage would probably put emphasis on quality, while consumer app at the early stage would probably put emphasis on velocity, maybe. Okay, and then the same consumer app, when you have 1 million active users, you have to put emphasis on quality. You can no longer put emphasis only on velocity, right? So it really depends on the stage and what you are doing. Maybe if you are an insurtech company, you cannot compromise quality at all. So again, depends. Once you understand what's important to you, then again, top down, you say, okay, I care about velocity. Now, what kind of KPIs can I put to my team that will actually support improving my velocity? Okay. Now, if you want, we can drill into each and every practical ideas of what you can do in order to improve your velocity or quality or output, whatever. But I think that's the high level idea of how we should think about it. And then we can deliver it or deliver the message, again, communicate it to all of the engineering team.
Sure.
The third part, which I find the most challenging part, is, okay, so we set the KPI, we understand what's important for us, and the team understand where the company goes. How can we change behavior? How can we actually make the single team, right, the 5-people team, to act differently or to even follow a KPI? It's, I think, the most challenging part of this scheme. And here again, it's we can do a whole talk about motivation, empowerment, how it should be done, how to avoid the feeling of micromanagement around this, and so on. But that's the third part, which again is the most challenging.
Sure.
So that's the framework as I see it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Nevo. That was really helpful in terms of how to think about objectives for an engineering team. Continuing on that, the next part of that is around culture and values. You talked about some of the values like transparency and so forth, and certain aspects of things like quality which are context based, depending on what type of company. Quality obviously is important for any company, but depending on what stage you are in and where you want to focus on, things may evolve. But if you can share a little bit about the baseline set of culture and values that you believe, independent of whatever you do, right? Whether you build a fintech company or a consumer company, there are certain core values that leaders believe in, right? So sort of the reason I asked that is some of that influences how you build your company, which is the next piece that we'll be talking about, building the team, and also how you run the team, right? The processes and the systems for making and operating things. So if you can touch upon your culture and values as a leader.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, in terms of the values I believe in and I see, I think I divide it to two. One is what, as a manager, what's your view? What your values, your personal values? I think it's very challenging to believe in one thing and do something different. So if I am an asshole and someone said it's important to be a people's person, I probably cannot be a people person because I'm an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. I think for the first part, and I found that engineers really appreciate this, is again, one is transparency. People they don't want the bullshit. They don't want to feel, and today, we haven't talked about it, but today I think the biggest challenge of this industry is that we went into COVID 2 years ago. The software demand, software world grew exponentially, and the supply, the amount of developers out there, cannot grow so fast. People need to study, people need to gain experience, and so on. So there's crazy demand and not enough people. And if you want to keep your people, so people cannot feel like they are some kind of, a tool of somebody or some small insignificant player in the team. And this is one of the reasons why transparency is so important. If you are transparent, if people understand, it goes back to communication, right? Communication, expectation, transparency. If people understand why they do what they do, if people understand why you as a manager take these decisions, they appreciate you. They appreciate you, they feel part of the process. If people feel like they have the stage, it's not only feel, if people really need to have the stage. If they do, then they feel part of something. They feel part of the process, and they care. Once someone cares, then they're with you. So this is why I think all these values around transparency and communication are the baseline. If you don't do it at today's environment, you die. I met several executives, I don't want to mention the names of the companies, but corporates. Companies that if you ask people 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they would say, that's an amazing company. That's an amazing brand. I want to work there. But the environment of these companies stayed somewhere at the late 90s, early 2000, where there's no transparency, where you work as a system and you're not agile enough, and they lose people. Not only they lose people, they cannot hire new people. And it's crazy. It's like, I talk to executives and they tell me we are like it's like we are at a point of like losing the company. I'm talking about corporates of thousands of developers. Okay, so this is why I think
Sure.
transparency and these values are super important. Second, I think, and this is what I believe in, second value that I like is to get the job done. Okay. Execution, but again, I'm looking at it from management perspective. I don't think that at today's environment, you should or can or should ask people, come to the office 9 to 7 or whatever, work here for 10, 12 hours every day, and I care about how much time you work, and you should report to me, and I'm going to track you or whatever. The notion, the value should be get the job done. Okay. Yep. When COVID started, I put all of my team on a Zoom call, and I told them, you know, I have kids. I know how hard it is. Everybody has constraints. I don't care if you cannot work during the day, work during the night. If you cannot work during the week, you can work during the weekend. I don't care. Just get the job done. Okay? That's the reality. This is what we should face. We are not going to stop. Get the job done. And I think eventually, again, if people care, if people feel part of something, and they know they should do the work and get the job done, and they do it. Okay? And I think they do it better than get the work or work. It's not about work. If you get a job done in 5 hours, so be it. Get a job done in 5 hours. I don't care. Okay? So that's the second thing. The third thing is, I think engineering, I think it was always there, but it became even more a team play.
Yeah.
It cannot be a solo thing anymore. Maybe we will touch some processes, but you know, thinking about delivering quickly a task or a feature. Today, it's obvious for everybody that if I do a piece of code, someone needs to do a review on my code. And so I need the help of my teammate, and my teammate needs to stop what they do and review my code. A simple thing which seems obvious to most of the industry today, but if you look back 10, 15 years, not that much, it didn't, like, it was for sure not obvious, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you have to care of other people, I think. People I hire have to be team players. They cannot run alone, okay?
Sure.
That's, I think, the third value that I think is super important, and this is how I build.
Sure. Yeah. No, really helpful. Again, you know, transparency, execution, and teamwork or team play, right? So yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I guess from a standpoint of continuing on the path of you know, starting with objectives, the culture and values, we move into organization, right? You know, your principles and practices, tools and processes that you've used for designing engineering organizations. You know, there's a bunch of different areas, right? Like hiring, you know, titles and re-leveling, you know, team size and structure, reporting structure, collaboration, conflict resolution, and all of that. So maybe, you know, few areas that you think are important for you when you think about, you know, designing and building, you know, your teams, right? Or the framework that you use.
Yeah. So it's endless. We can talk about it for 3 weeks, right?
That's right.
I'll try to touch some main points. So one thing about hiring, I think, again, at today's environment, we are at a point that even as a startup, we have no choice. We cannot hire only senior people. Even when you have a team of 20 people, you cannot hire only senior people because there are not enough senior people in the market. Okay, so the framework I see, I see works, and I see it for us, and I see it for other companies. You have to have several senior people, and then you have to build the mechanism to to develop the juniors.
Yep.
Okay.
The next set of.
You have to make this compromise, and the earlier you do it, the earlier you manage to build a system that can, systematically teach those juniors how to become effective. The more you have a chance to stay in the game. So that's, I think, one thing people need to switch their because I know many people that say I'm a good company, I can leverage this, and I can hire in the first 50 people, I can only hire seniors. It was true even 5 years ago, I think, unless you are like the 1 out of 100 companies, maybe, but otherwise you have to build a system to teach those and to train those junior developers, because there are many juniors. Many people understood they need to change their profession and get into the tech industry. So you have plenty of juniors, you just need to find the right potential. What we do today, in many cases, we hire potential. We don't hire senior people. So or only senior people. So that's one thing. Second is remote. Understand you have to build your team remotely. Understand you have to look for talent outside your city, country, even continent. Today we work with development teams in Ukraine, Georgia, the country, not the state, in the US, in Israel. So we have a distributed team all over. One tip here, try to make it as close as possible to your time zone. It makes things much easier.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you are in the Middle East or Europe, try to stay there as long as you can. Hire people from Eastern Europe, hire people from Europe, hire people from wherever. If you're in the US, I met amazing teams from Mexico and from South America. So you have plenty of talent there, but try to remain as much as possible in similar time zones. Otherwise, it can become very challenging. And the second tip about this is try to build your teams as centers. Like, don't take one people at each city. Try to build a team of 20, 30 people at the same location. Again, increases the chances to success tremendously. Okay, so these are just 2 tips I can think about. So that's about hiring in today's environment. And then you mentioned many subjects. I think I'm going to touch one. The way I see it at the early stage, I like to compare. I spent many years in the Air Force, so what can I do? I have the metaphor from there. I like to compare the small startup to a Commando team. So a Commando team, this is our goal. We are going to reach our goal, no matter the methodology, no matter the way. We are going to break things. We are going to be very aggressive. we are going to compromise aggressively on features, on quality, whatever we decide on. But we are a Commando team. We can do whatever we want. We don't deal with things like, is it predictable? Is it going to succeed for sure or not? We just try, okay? Commando team. And as you grow, I think if you, like, imagine if we stay in the army metaphor, imagine you have now 100 people. It's very hard to manage 100 people as Commando team, okay? Even if you go by the squads of Spotify, where what they try to do is to keep Commando teams separated, right? Each Commando team has everything they need in order to reach their goals. Nice. I really like this approach, but still, even if you have 100 Commando teams, you cannot manage them as if you had one Commando team or two Commando teams, okay? So you have to become an army. And when you become an army, you start have the hierarchy, you start having responsibilities, you start having processes, okay? At this point, if you keep the same methodologies, you're going to, most probable, again, what I say is not definitive, but most probable, you're going to hit a wall and you're going to find yourself in a chaos, okay? And I've seen, for example, I have a continuous argument with one of my partners about Kanban versus Scrum, where I think Kanban is a very good fit for a Commando team. But as you grow to an army, you should probably switch to something like Scrum, even if it's not exactly Scrum. And I think the argument comes down to, is it possible to keep the Kanban? It's a different argument and subjects. We don't have time to get into it. My point is, in my opinion, you have to generate some kind of more organized, predictable methodology, which you can have some kind of rituals that you can check yourself, okay? And something that repeats itself, because I think, and that's my last point, one of the most important metrics or principles for a team as they grow is, can they be predictable? Yep. It's a very strong word. And why I think it's so important, because if the team can be predictable, then all the internal communications are healthier. There's much less conflicts between product and engineering, for example. The business can, put down real goals and plans, and the business can understand much better what are they going to get and when. Yep. And in order to become more predictable, you have to generate, for example, you have to do retrospective meetings or rituals, because if you don't do, then you cannot become more predictable. You cannot understand how I planned this and did this and why, if you don't look back at yourself and try to improve from one iteration to the next iteration, you cannot be more predictable, okay? And this is why I think as the team grows, they need to use some kind of methodologies, for example, the Scrum methodology, okay? Yep. So that's, I think, the way I look at building the process of a growing team. Sure. I hope it's clear, but that's my point.
Sure. No, definitely. I think, I think the process is the last last part that we were going to cover in our discussion. And I think, it was a good segue into the Scrum and Kanban. In fact, when you mentioned that, I remember there is also something called Scrumban, which I guess is, best of, or trying to get the best of both worlds. So coming to the process piece, again, different areas in terms of how you make and operate things, starting with coding standards, frameworks, how do you pick programming languages, your philosophy on code reviews, how do you make architectural decisions, testing, whole bunch of things. And again, the idea is not to cover all of them, but in some of these cases, it depends on what is important for that particular context, right? In terms of, if it's the quality discussion we had, in terms of testing, again, how do we want to think about testing, right? Do we want to, focus on, and it's not that it's one or the other, but, do you want to focus more on unit testing as compared to, integration and system testing, or other way about things like that, right? So in general, in the process bucket, both including, making things, but also the DevOps side of things, right? How do you do, think about monitoring and alerting, service configurations, a whole bunch of different areas. As I said before, the idea is not to cover all of them, but in general, in that bucket, a process bucket of making and operating things, what do you see as important things that, as a leader, you would, pay attention to, or how you would think about those?
Yeah. Okay. Again, very, very, very wide, wide scope of things.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll touch 2 or 3 points.
Yeah.
First of all, not going into how to pick the right coding language. It's also less of my expertise.
Sure.
One principle I think people should follow is don't take things to the extreme. Okay, and I personally believe in continuous deployment. I believe in full coverage of testing. Definitely, I believe it creates a very good accountability of people over tasks and over the pipeline. And I think it has much more positive than negative. Having said all that, the world is not perfect. And if you rely only on that, if you say, I'm not going to have someone in my organization who is responsible for quality, for example, then most probable you are going to face quality issues. Okay, and that's what I mean when I say not taking to the extreme. Okay, because I see companies says the minute we hire someone who is responsible for quality, it doesn't have to do QA, just have to be responsible that quality is met. Once we hire one person, then everybody are not going to have the same accountability as they have today on their code. I definitely understand this approach, but I think we're all human, and this is why I think we cannot take it to the extreme.
Yep.
Same, by the way, with Kanban and Scrum. In a topic world, in an optimal environment, Kanban can survive thousands of people. Yeah, it requires people. Forgive me for the metaphor here, but it requires everybody to be adults, to have full responsibility, to do their best efforts always. Because that's the idea of Kanban. You always work according to the first priority. But, again, we are all human. That's my point. And as human, our nature is to be kids, not to be adults. That's like the basic nature of most people. And again, taking back to Scrum versus Kanban, Scrum, one of the things it makes you is to put a deadline, is to say, I am committed to deliver this at this deadline. Take me, I'm the CEO of the company, and no one wants the company to succeed more than me. If I have a list of tasks, I will definitely do my best effort to finish as many tasks as possible in a single week. If you give me a deadline, if I have a presentation on Friday and I have to get it done, most probable I will do whatever it takes to get it done by Friday because I have a deadline. And it's psychology. It's not because I don't want, it's because I'm human.
Yeah.
Same with testing, same with everything. This is one thing I really believe in. Second, like I said before, I think in terms of the process, for example, of code review, I think it's the most obvious process. These are things people need to implement from day one. So even if we are Commando team, even if we do Kanban, even if everything is a mess, you build the process of code review, for example, from day one. You build the process of deploying every day from day one. Don't wait with it. The more you wait, the harder it's going to be. I think the price of moving slower at the beginning, if it exists, it's not that high if you do it from day one. From two people, start doing it. And B, in the short term, it will pay itself back. Okay, so if you build it right and you have code review, your quality is higher. You can deliver at the same pace as if you didn't have code review after, I don't know, a few months, but the quality is much higher. So your work on bugs will be less, and then eventually your velocity is higher, right? So the second principle, build it early, stick to the important things like continuous deployment, like code review and teamwork, and define this process. You use GitHub, use it right. I met teams that someone is working on code, then she needs to get a review. So instead of asking, like doing a review request in GitHub and assign a reviewer, she goes to Slack and she writes in the channel, can someone code review my pull request? And then when you look at this team's cycle time, cycle time from the minute someone started to work on a task and until it is merged, you see it's long. And when you drill down into why is it long, you see the waiting for review time is like 3 days. And you dig more and you ask why, and you see they actually don't use GitHub and they are paying for it, but they don't use it the way they can.
Yep.
These tools, they let you, if you leverage the things they give you of like out of the box, you can definitely build a healthy process in your organization. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Nevo. Again, great, description of how you think about, objectives for the engineering team, culture and values, organization, and process and systems. And as you said, these are topics that we can talk for weeks, if not months.
Yeah.
Certainly, what the intent was to get your thought process as a leader, which will certainly be helpful for the listeners in terms of when they have to think about these areas. Thanks once again for taking the time for coming in and sharing your thoughts on these areas, and good luck with the Acumen. The engineering operations space or engineering analytics space is certainly an interesting space, and I wish you and the team the best of luck. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.